because it is what has driven me to annihilating you. 1A! 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 1A!
Past the veneer of InZOI's version 0.3.0, we see it's more of a mixed bag. The update gives us noticeable improvements to animation and UI. We've also got new skills like swimming and mining, along with added vehicles and 25 new locations to explore. Yet, despite that, we also have new bugs, clunky camera controls, and haphazard understanding of crafting gameplay, which has also been added to this update. This new update takes a lot of the fun ideas from other tried and tested life sim games and introduces those ideas here. That said, we now have an unbalanced crafting system that struggles to unify existing game mechanics. While the hope is that these improve in future updates, it's important to realistically look at where they are now, as previous development focus has left a lot to be desired. In these last 5 months, they decided to work on quote-unquote a free DLC add-on. By the by, I put quotations on the word free there because this is their current stance on DLC. The word until is doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. And while it looks like they'll be pivoting away from that due to test reasons, check this interview out for more on that, it's important to bring in a wider lens to this update to better inform you where the game is at now. But going back to this update, we see 25 new locations added, but the reality is most of these venues feel like a rushed attempt to include new locations for the sake of including new locations. And while some rabbit holes add interesting gameplay ideas, we'll get to more on that later in the video, most areas are pretty hollow and without meaningful gameplay reasons to explore them. Instead of taking the time to gradually release more refined fixes and bug-free features, we see a smorgasbord of features and systems that beg the question, just what direction are we heading in with these new updates, i.e. a mixed bag. Before we get started, please note I'll be covering key features I found most interesting and gameplay I was able to test. If you'd like to see the full patch notes, please see the link in the description. Also, since Cahaya is released separately as DLC with the potential for any DLC being monetized after early access, I'm playing it safe and walking us through the base game update only. My Cahaya review will be a separate video following this one. Now with all that squared away, let's have a look at InZOI's biggest update yet. First, let's cover some new assets, character customization, and improvements made to build mode. Again, for a more exact listing, please see their full patch notes. This update adds 6 new hairstyles, 15 items for kids only, and much more for a total of 56 new items, most of which resemble a more summer beach vibe. For build mode, they've added 104 new building items, from new fences, roofs, and now elevators. We also have swimming pools, speaking of which, you can now swim manually in the water and passively gain skill points doing so. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be an auto swim interaction, which can definitely be tiring on the fingies as you slap through WASD there, but if there is one, I just couldn't find it in my testing. But on to some good news, we got a much needed remake to their UI. These changes specifically target the emotions displayed by your Zois. Reading Zois emotions should be easier at a glance. Your Zois profile picture will entirely light up a color with an added word describing that emotion. Another noticeable change are these thermometer looking indicators. These are replacing what was once a row of white dots that would sometimes light up certain colors indicating a certain mood. Now instead we have these thermostat things that replace that. The main function of which is perhaps to slow down quick mood shifts that your Zois may have. The bar gradually increases and decreases depending on the activity your Zoi engages with and happens to align for that given mood or emotion. This is determined by the tarot card system, preferences, ambitions, and urges. In practice, it's quite clunky, overly cluttered, and needs better implementation. This whole thing can be shelved as it's simply not where it needs to be right now. Really looking at this system, there's just too many unused mood slots that may or may not be represented as you scroll through them, and depending on your Zoi's mood status effects may stack over each other, making it a chore to read and or sift through, all coming from a variety of systems working in the background that can make it difficult to track and or predictably use if you wanted to replicate certain moods. Suffice it to say, I was able to play through and test without severe consequences no matter the mood changes, hence making this widely useless. There are obvious indications on these moods and urges that tells us what they do, but as far as having meaningful impact, it's either minimal or non-existent. This entire system needs desperate reimagining. This is a larger issue beyond the scope of this video, but wrapping up this portion, for the most part, the UI has been improved. Being able to see information at a glance is much more helpful here. Hopefully in future it'll be much more intuitive. For example, having the vehicle mount option as the same keybind, meaning it works as dismounts as well as a mount vehicle option. Honestly, when it comes to mobility, there just really needs to be a mindset to make everything more ease of use. For example, the mount option recognizing you're indoors and then having the game automatically move your Zoi to the nearest driving space, that kind of thing, hence avoiding just more sub-menu clutter. So let's talk about some new and improved features. Zois will now show thought balloons as floating emotes. These bubbles do a good job of keeping you in the know of how your Zois feel, and what I found most helpful is when mining, the thought bubble will actually show you what you mined. Conversations have changed. I struggle to say improved. Conversations now work a little differently in where interactions you choose now cycle between 2 to 3 possible paths. So this band-aids some of the clunkiness that we often see with Zoi interactions. Typically, Zois walk away quickly after an interaction cycle completes, and with this change, the player now has more time to choose another interaction. This also gives more chances for your Zois to develop relationships more quickly, whether that be negative or positive, by just adding more outcomes to a single interaction. They've also made a change where players can choose conversation options even without emotional conditions. The thing is, while I appreciate one interaction being able to cycle in more than one outcome, they have still yet to cut down on some meaningless interaction clutter. And by removing emotional conditions that would otherwise limit conversation options, they've decided to undercut mood and emotions as viable gameplay for more interaction bloat. We know that they have the capacity to make one interaction do more than one thing or have several different outcomes, which, to relate this more to their gameplay, should be impacted by mood or emotions. Instead, what they did, and I quote, "and players can explore more conversation options even without specific emotional conditions." Okay, so let's get to collaborative actions, aka more group activities. They say that Zois can now do collaborative actions like eating and playing games together, which is true, but with like an asterisk. So Zois eating together, or as we typically know it, group meals, function by clicking a kitchen table and from there serving soup. As far as I tested, soup is the only thing that can be served. It doesn't raise cooking skill, it spawns on the table, and it doesn't require money to be spent. Now, group activities, the way that they work is that you click on an object that has the group activity function, choose who's available, then you hypothetically should do the interaction together. Whether it be sitting on a couch, playing chess, or even dancing together, this is clunky and uninspired, unfortunately. If you can get group activities working as intended, it just feels meaningless in terms of how this impacts wider gameplay. For example, does chess increase rapport and or gaming skill? No, because gaming isn't a skill. Does dancing together increase your dancing skill or rapport? No. What are the wider intentions for a player to even initiate group activities? Even if we're to consider that this is better to accommodate dollhouse players, we still have to look at it from a more practical sense. The interactions often happen way too quickly to be meaningful, story of my life, and it doesn't contribute for a more sandbox, I'm sorry. It doesn't contribute to a more sandbox experience. While new, it's way too buggy and surface level to be released at this state. Stupid. So romantic enhancements, I think they exist. So I don't know what to say about this. Okay, in my playthrough, I was able to romance a Zoi within a day, and I gave them gifts as well, and I mean, I didn't see a new menu, nothing really happened. Yeah, I didn't see an increase to relationships. I don't know, maybe my game is just bugging out. I didn't see any kind of difference. Please do let me know if you've seen a difference in relationships, because as far as my experience goes, it was pretty easy to just, romance anybody that you wanted. I'm not entirely sure, and I gave just random gifts as well. I didn't see anything different, to be honest with you. They say there's changes. Natural disasters, this is cool. Love to see it. I can't wait for them to expand on this. and have greater impact on gameplay, because again, I know I get it, we're in this dollhouse era, but more life simulation gameplay is just, it's way cool to see. You know, they added events like dust storms, heavy rain, and heat waves. I only experienced the heat wave, and seeing it work actually made me worry about my Zoi's well-being, so love that. Also, we have new apps for our smartphones. They are the insurance, loan, budget report, and city trip apps. The city trip app allows us to go to Cahaya, Doan, or Bliss Bay on the spot. That said, I do worry about app and text messaging clutter as we add more content to the game. For example, loans, insurance, and budget are separate apps. This could have easily been truncated into one app and associated with the in-game bank in their world. I just don't find anything wrong with just simplifying and unifying systems that already exist. I think it's a good thing, in my humble, verbose opinion, to just make things easier to read, have things all in one place, and to just not to overly complicate systems that should just be easy to read. You know, I just feel like simplicity should be key here, especially for InZOI. I mean, look, just real quick, having bank loans and your finances and your budget, like if they all associated with the bank that exists in the game, Nara Bank, I think it's called, how cool would that be? Just a little bit of lore or a little bit of unification to the world, you know, could just make the whole experience feel that much more immersive. And should banking or working as a teller or working in a bank be an active career in the future, it does look like there are assets in the world that maybe clue us in that might be an active career in the future. Wouldn't that be cool to like have that functionality relate to the app in some way? I don't know, man. I think it'd be cool. Anyways, on a side note, loans are interesting in that you can buy more expensive homes with financial help, but it is severely imbalanced as the fees can easily get out of hand, as job rates are extraordinarily low and the amount of days that you're able to work is needlessly limited. One exciting addition that did come with this update are 25 new locations across Bliss Bay and Doan, as well as some existing locations getting improved interiors. As mentioned at the top of the video, however, this is a mixed bag, but this largely depends on how you view the direction InZOI is heading in. If you're more into the dollhouse aspect of things, then just having these places added is more than enough for you to create your own experiences. That said, in the life sim aspect, there's a lot left on the table here. Again, perhaps a more procedural release of these areas would have made for a more impactful and robust gameplay experience. To sum it up, whether it be the high-rise hotel, bars, arcade, fashion store, and more, there's just no significant gameplay reason associated with these areas. Does being in a bar, arcade, or coffee shop impact mood or urges negatively or positively? If your Zoi's preference is gaming, does going to an arcade better impact their mood? Does going to a library give you the concentration status that impacts how quickly you can gain skills? Does going to a fashion store or a grocer matter if you can just spawn food from the fridge or wear any clothes you want via the mirror? So let's talk rabbit holes. That's what you call locations where your Zois interact with and sort of just disappear into that void. For example, places like theaters raise your Zois film skill, museums raise their critical thinking skill. We need more of this. These places contribute to gameplay, and in doing so, there's gameplay reasons to explore the world and go out to these areas. We actually see this with graffiti interactions that are scattered in places across Bliss Bay and Doan. So it's definitely in their purview that they're able to create gameplay reasons to make the open world much more interesting. Again, we're stuck in this dollhouse mentality where everything and all things should be available to you with little to no challenge or consequence. But when you see places that can level up skill points in a more varied way, already you're creating more dynamics to your Zoi's life. Hopefully, one can only hope that we'll see more of this. On that, let's talk skills. So please note that some of these skills are actually restricted to a new save, and with that in mind, we have swimming and snorkeling. Fishing, while not new, has been expanded. Zois can fish in rivers and oceans and use higher quality rods, increasing the chances of catching rare fish that you can put on display in fish tanks. Mining, handiwork, and gathering skills have been added. Zois can gather raw gemstones throughout the city and cut them into jewels at a crafting table. Again, more on this later. And to keep track of all of this, we have the family collection log. The log shows fish, crops, gems, jewels, and other collectibles that can be gathered in the world, along with their prices and descriptions. Actually quite handy. With these new additions, we also have farming. So in order to farm, you need to buy these plots in build mode, and with tools like watering cans and rakes, Zois can grow crops, which they can then use to cook or to sell for profit. We'll talk more about that profit margin in a bit. So let's talk about InZOI's biggest addition to gameplay. Crafting, farming, mining, and fishing are the key cornerstones to this update. As stated at the top of the video, while interesting and fun early on, it quickly loses its charm the more you play it. Now, I want to be clear on this. The problem here is not necessarily the lack of depth in these features, because that can come in time. But my issue is that how this new gameplay contradicts and undercuts existing game mechanics that doesn't seem to have been fixed or better tuned to mindfully incorporate this new gameplay, which could have easily been done in the background, right? Like leading up to this update. That's kind of where I'm at with this. So before we can actually talk about those systems, we have to put in perspective what hasn't changed. So let's just talk about Dongwon to keep things simple. In Dongwon, the highest paying job is in Dongwon Solutions, where you're limited to 3 workdays and that it pays 2,169. In fact, most jobs have these really odd limitations. For example, part-time jobs being limited to 3 days, as well as full-time rabbit hole jobs also being limited to 3 days. Active careers are a little different, like firefighter is 4 days a week with a pay scale of 279, with the highest pay being 1,395. For K-pop trainee, it's 5 days a week, ranging from 136 a day all the way to 600 as a senior trainee. So why does that pay scaling matter? Part of the update was to promote a more rags to riches gameplay experience, but if you compare the money you make from crafting and selling at a market stand, then it puts all of these jobs to shame. Here's a rundown of how I found myself selling gold pickaxes for 3,600 a piece, and if done right, you can make an upwards of 30,000 a day with very little barrier to entry. So to make gold pickaxes, you need your handiness skill to be level 2. So how do you increase that skill? Well, you can go to the crafting bench and you can spam making stone pickaxes or wooden fishing rods or any of the 4 basic tools. Unfortunately, it's as dull as that. Yes, you spend 200 making these things, but you can just sell these items in build mode for also 200. Originally, I went about the world and collected these ingredients like a good boy. However, I realized that I could just go to the farm store and buy everything that I needed for an egregiously low sum. To make a gold pickaxe, you need 2 rocks, 2 sticks, and 1 gold ore. At the farm store, rocks and sticks cost 1, with gold ore costing 65. So for 69, I can make a gold pickaxe which can be sold in build mode for 1,200 meows, which is their currency that I've been trying to avoid saying this whole time. But if you put it in the market stand, you can actually sell it for 3,600. Again, no barrier to entry. You don't need social skills or anything like that. You don't need a moodlet to sell it at a high rate. From what I've seen, nothing impacts your chances, as it seems to be random and not skill-based or based on other systems in the game. And if you build the market stand at home, you'll get the added benefit of Zois cleaning the outside of your house for you, which I guess is cool. As a side note, the resale store / delivery store it's also not working for me. Every time I go there, I never see any good deals other than them wanting to buy whatever I have at its base value. So all of this is to say, like, what are we doing with the gameplay here? Like, what is the actual vision that they have in store for us of like how they want us to use this new system? Because never mind the fact that getting these skills is not only a chore, it doesn't even scale properly. For example, leveling up the mining skill doesn't increase how quickly I mine out a node or lessens the energy used to mine. Upgrading to a gold pickaxe and mining higher tier nodes also feels like low impact on my chances. I barely saw any real difference pretty much only really landing on silver ores. Ultimately, it's so off-putting that sidestepping the process altogether just feels like a better use of your time. Same goes with farming as a viable way to make money. You have to keep in mind the process and the UI in which you need to navigate these sales. Let's just say with farming, you get past the toil of the interaction spam needed to till, plant, fertilize, water each individual plot after 3 days or so, then selling it at a higher rate at a market stand. There's just way too many menus for very little reward. Mind you, leveling up handiness or gathering, which farming increases, doesn't speed up any of these processes. So, which kind of just goes against crafting in like life sims, like as a genre. To put it simply, it's like they took all the drudgery of life sim games, but forgot to include all the incremental rewards, the progression system, and the scaling that actually makes crafting fun and unique in those life sim games. For crafting and crafting chains to work in life sim games, you need a strongly integrated system that works at all levels of your game design. And at each phase of progression, it should feel meaningful and impactful to your character's growth. At each step from level 1 through 2, you should be able to see noticeable changes in the reward scaling, giving players the incentive and the idea that you're on the right path. There should be limitations and challenges that reward each crafting tier, all of which should impact how quickly your Zoi can do a thing, or how consistently they can find difficult gems and fish and have an overabundance of crops that can then be sold for more money if they're consistent, growing within the right seasons. None of that should be bogged down by incessant overclicking or clunky inventory menus. There is a reason why crafting life sim games utilize hotkeys 1 through 0 so as to quickly switch out of equipment. There's reasons why inventory management is so clean and intuitive, where many games allow for drag and drop functionality or multiple craft quantity at a crafting site. When I initially saw these crafting changes, I was actually glad to see how mining as a skill could impact crafting a better fishing rod. Advanced pickaxes and fishing rods share the same scaling when it comes to their crafting tiers. That is to say, copper, iron, silver, and gold ores. In my mind, I thought, hey, that's amazing. There's an attempt to unify this new gameplay. I was then gravely disappointed how the game constantly undercuts even their most basic system. Not only can you buy stone, copper, and steel pickaxes, you can buy wood, copper, and a steel fishing rod for super cheap, which then undermines the whole reason to go out and collect actual ores, rocks, and branches in the world. The real bottleneck is the lackluster grind of the unchanging speed associated with crafting, fishing, farming, and mining interactions. And I know where this comes from. It's again from this desire to appeal to this dollhouse gameplay where you just don't restrict anything, right? You don't want systems, because the thinking is that challenge is somehow an aversion to what life simmers want. So this exciting new system is then undercut by just buying your way through all of the gameplay on the cheap. There really needs, in my opinion, to be 2 modes to InZOI. One for those dollhouse players who can have everything all at once, and another for people who want an open world life sim game, because what this feels like right now is a disjointed mishmash without rhyme or reason, lacking identity. Again, it just feels like they're just pulling interesting gameplay from other places without fully exploring them and making them uniquely InZOI. Instead of creating nuance to these systems, like having fishing, mining, and gathering licenses to restrict this activity with perhaps quests and ranking associated with those skills, maybe even making some of that a criminal activity or bad karma when you don't have proper credentials, instead of just selling basic tools like a basic fishing rod and a basic pickaxe, not all the while selling higher tier versions of them, would actually make crafting the damn things meaningful, instead of restricting ores to just iron or even just to stone to give more meaning to mining, instead of creating a delivery box or making the inventory UI less of a chore, instead of creating a better storage system, not just display cases or tossing stuff on the ground to clear inventory space. Instead of making custom furniture a handiness skill, which would have been better, not a housework skill, instead of utilizing mood effects to impact drop rates or crafting speed, instead of having market stalls actually have bartering and dancing be skill-based or mood-based, instead of crafting items as one interaction, not a separate 5 interactions, i.e. take out ingredients, tap with the hammer, then just hammer, look around in thought, and blow a warm breath. Yes, these are all individual interactions for no good reason. This one really bugged me, okay, because they've proven that they can make one interaction for a Zoi to Zoi interaction. They've proven they can do one interaction for 3 outcomes. But for whatever reason, when crafting something, they have like 5 separate cycles of animation to do the one craft. Like I don't know, it really bugged me and I really had to mention it in this script. Instead of any of these things, we're left in this like strange direction in that I don't know where this game is heading or what it wants to be. Does it want to be a crafting life sim game and take that part of itself seriously? Or was this a surface level attempt to add whatever gameplay they could muster as they were working on DLC? Because the more they undervalue these new gameplay ideas and are willing to release incomplete features instead of a steady pace that refines gameplay, I have concerns. It's in those concerns, and based on previous news coming out from their camp, I can't in good faith recommend this game, at least at its current state. Your money and time is way too important, and there are just like way too many life sim games out right now in a variety of styles, especially crafting life sim games, that just do what InZOI is trying to do, but way better, and with a lot more focus as well. I suggest checking back in this game in about a year or two and to see if they recommitted themselves into expanding on base gameplay features, because in this era of rushed and early access games, you just never know. And if you enjoyed this video, thank you. Please share your appreciation the best way you know how. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I do appreciate that. And I appreciate you. And I hope to see you in the next video, whatever it may be. So until then, I will see you then. Bye for now.